Hey guys, how you all doing? It is Sam from Gemini Martial Arts team, and today we're going to be talking about why CHOI KWANG DO is just so bad. Booyah!
To find out more about what CHOI KWANG DO can do for you and your family, please visit.
Okay, as always, Droogs, hope you're doing well. Hope you're enjoying the sunny weather we're getting. It is getting warmer, so yes, winter is finally gone. Waited long enough. So, on to business for today. What we're going to discuss today is why the martial art of CHOI KWANG DO is just so bad. Now, I have done another video about CHOI KWANG DO from the past. That video is no longer live, so I just thought I'd actually do an updated version of CHOI KWANG DO. Now, I like to see myself as an open-minded individual, and I'm a very tolerant individual. However, when it comes to CHOI KWANG DO, that is like the limit of my tolerance. I can see good and bad in every single martial art. Every martial art that we have can offer something. They have their strengths, they also have their weaknesses. So to just label a martial art as being bad, full stop, I appreciate, and I find this quite ironic saying it in this video, but it's a very naive and inaccurate statement. Everything needs a context. A martial art is bad in certain ways because X, Y, and Z, you know. But when it comes to CHOI KWANG DO, I quite openly make an exception. And the point being, first and foremost, CHOI KWANG DO is not so much a martial art. CHOI KWANG DO is a cult. And I have some negative experiences with CHOI. When I first became aware of CHOI KWANG DO, this was like when I was a kid and I was doing taekwondo, and my instructor at the time, he had these magazines called like Taekwondo and Korean Combat Arts, and sometimes he used to let me borrow them. And anyway, going through these magazines, every so often it would come up with like this big 2-page spread advert for a martial art called CHOI KWANG DO, and it had a picture of their founder, Grandmaster Choi, kind of like doing a kick, and it looked really awkward. He was all like bent-legged and looked as though he was wearing like these jeans, basically.
Let's go to hell tonight.
And they all had pictures of like strange coloured doboks and uniforms. They looked more like costumes than uniforms. And I remember even at a young age looking at this thinking, oh, this looks a bit peculiar, for want of a better word.
Let's go to hell tonight.
Years, I began to hear more of CHOI. I once had a friend many years ago who practiced CHOI KWANG DO, and I went to go and see them train once at a school in Horsham, and I wasn't impressed by what I saw. I heard certain things about CHOI down the line as well. And so anyway, one day back in 2014, I decided to actually go to a local CHOI KWANG DO school. And the people there, I've done a video about that experience, which again I said is not live anymore, but I spoke quite in depth about what happened at the school, what I was required to do in the lesson, how the lesson was formatted, and my thoughts and feelings during and after the lesson. I'm not going to go over that in this video. I'll just be repeating myself. But this school, they constantly went on about how great CHOI KWANG DO was. They're going on about how it's the most effective martial art in the world. And that's actually on their website. I went onto their website, and actually on like the first page, I'll include a link to it, but they're basically saying like, yeah, it's proven to be the most effective martial art. And yet they didn't provide any references to show when it was proven. What year was it proven? Who was it proven against? Who are the witnesses? No evidence like this. So it was just a statement which was baseless, and it wasn't based on fact.
Let's go to hell tonight.
Other people at the school, they just kept going on about how great the founder was, Grandmaster Kwang-jo Choi. They're like, yeah, he's amazing. He's like, he's great. You know, they almost made him like he was like the Messiah or something. But he's not the Messiah. He's just a very naughty boy. And yet none of these people had actually ever met this Grandmaster Kwang-jo Choi. So they were basically saying he was great based on like secondary references from what other people had said down the line. It's like, oh yeah, Grandmaster Choi is amazing. passed down like Chinese whispers until it got to this school, and they said, "Oh well, because other people say he's amazing, by default he must be amazing." That's normative influence for you right there. It's when other people do or say stuff, you get influenced to follow in kind. But again, that was based in no fact. But Choi Kwang Do, in terms of being a cult, Grandmaster Kwang Choi, from what I understand, did ITF Taekwondo. And he went to Southeast Asia, I think it was Malaysia, and then he went to a few other places before. Apparently, he had some sort of like health breakdown. He blamed Taekwondo for contributing to his bad health, which I personally find a bit of an idiosyncrasy, because if you're already fit and active, doing a martial art will only keep you fit and active. And he's the only person, actually, when I think about it, he's actually the only person I know who's actually done a martial art which has actually had the opposite effect. Now, of course, in martial arts, we all get injuries from time to time, but we take time out, we recuperate, we heal, then we go back into it. This guy seems to be like, the more he did ITF Taekwondo, the more it damaged him. So he was a very strange case to begin with. He was like an exception to the rule, an anomaly, so to speak. So anyway, he stopped doing Taekwondo, believing Taekwondo was contributing to his physical deterioration, and he then made his own martial art called Choi Kwang Do, which was basically a martial art named after himself. So it's almost like if I made a martial art called Sam Do or Sam Jutsu, like the way of Sam and what have you. I often find, again, when people make martial arts and they call them after themselves, it's suggestive of narcissism. It's suggestive of an inflated ego. If I was to make a martial art myself, I'd keep it very simplistic. I just call it, I don't know, close quarter techniques or something like that, or something that just says what the martial art is and doesn't involve names, doesn't involve fancy terminology. It is something which is just quite simplistic. Sure, a lot of people might say, okay, it's not fancy enough, but who cares? A martial art is not meant to be fancy. A martial art at its core is meant to be something which can protect you. So somebody calling a martial art after themselves is, yeah, very, very egocentric, and it's suggestive of somebody who thinks quite highly of themselves. So that is a first red flag of Choi Kwang Do. Second red flag of Choi Kwang Do. You can get a black belt in no time at all. Again, briefly going back to when I did Choi Kwang Do at this school, I went for 2 lessons. That was enough for me. But on the end of my first lesson, the school instructors were like, "Oh, we're so impressed. Next week when you come in, we're going to put you in for your grading." How can you justify that? It's like, it's my second lesson. You don't even know if I'm going to stay, and already you want to put me in for a grading, not for the foreseeable future. You want to put me in for a grading next week. So anyway, I went back next week, I did a grading, and I got a belt. I've forgotten even what colour belt it is. It didn't mean anything to me. So they graded me in Choi Kwang Do on my second lesson. And they're like, yeah, you can now go to like the next belt, which is like gold belt, then purple belt, then silver striped beige belt, and then magnolia red double stripe triple cross brown belt, and all these weird and wonderful coloured belts. And it seemed to be just a belt mill. It was, come training, you can get this belt. Oh, you've been here 3 weeks. Have another belt. Have this belt. Have that belt. Have a belt round your neck. Have a belt round your ankles. Cuff your belt around your wrists and suspend them above the ceiling. This kind of malarkey. Belt mill. And obviously for your gradings, you have to pay for as well. So you're essentially, this is what I've seen during research. People will pay for their gradings, and the gradings will consist of very, very basic pad work. Somebody will be holding a kick shield and somebody will be doing these awkward techniques against it. Then you have to do patterns, which you just stand there and you kind of like don't even move off the spot, and you do these really bent arm punches and bent leg kicks, and that gets you a belt. So essentially you're paying for a belt. You're almost, from what I've read, it's almost guaranteed that you're going to get you're going to pass your grading. So you're essentially just paying for a belt. Yeah, the class sizes as well. And now I understand class sizes are very subjective, and they fluctuate across the board. Some people have very small schools. Some people have like large conglomerates.
Let's go to hell tonight.
But everything I've seen of Choi Kwang Do, the schools seem to be huge in terms of numbers, and they range from like kids to OAPs, all training together. Now, I have my feelings and opinions about that. I personally don't think children should necessarily train with adults. Reason being that if you are an adult and you go to a martial arts class, you're expecting to have adult material. You're expecting to roll with people your own age, of similar abilities, similar age and what have yous, to be able to kind of actually learn properly. If you're an adult and you go to a class and it's literally just full of like 6-year-olds, you're not going to learn anything really. So these choice schools being mixed ages across the board, it's nonsensical. Nobody is learning anything, and you're not going to be able to like teach anything with a focus on the lesson. You're going to have to basically take everybody's age into consideration to what you can teach. But Choi Kwang Do does that. It just basically anybody walks through the door, right, fine, you're a 6-year-old, let's put you up with this testosterone fueled, sexually frustrated 19-year-old. There you go, do some sparring. Wow. Recipe for disaster.
Let's go to hell tonight.
Additionally with Choi Kwang Do as well, it is the glorification of Grandmaster Choi. From what I've seen on different posts online, if you're in the Choi network, you're not allowed to critique Grandmaster Choi. Or they don't necessarily say that explicitly, from what I understand. But they make the environment so conditioned to be worshipful of Grandmaster Choi that if anybody does dissent or says anything which is against the narrative, Choi Kwang Do will not like it. It will not tolerate it, and the person will probably be ostracized and then asked to leave because they're not showing proper respect or what have you. You will only learn if you question. And a lot of things, a lot of concepts, a lot of modes of thought and modalities have come around in life. Religion, politics, science, social sciences, philosophy have all come around because people have questioned the narrative. I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying it's wrong, but a lot of things are around today because people broke away from the modus operandi and have been innovators. So if you're in an environment where you're not encouraged to question or challenge or critique, you're not in a healthy environment, you're not going to develop, and you're not going to grow. Choi Kwang Do likes that mindset. It doesn't want you to grow. It wants you to be the grey person. It wants you to be another blank face. It wants you to be a number. A small cog in a big machine is basically what Choi Kwang Do wants you as a student to be. Additionally, with Choi Kwang Do, it's actually the techniques themselves. Now, for a martial art, for you to pay a lot of money to go and train at a martial art, which is allegedly proven to be the most effective one in the world, you would expect to have some top-notch tuition. What I experienced myself with Choi, and from what I saw, and from what I've heard from my old friend, and from reading other examples of what people have said on YouTube and other forums, Choi Kwang Do does not teach top-notch tuition. As a matter of fact, Choi Kwang Do teaches JS. And I remember when I did my Choi lessons, we were taught to do kicks like with a really bent leg. Yeah, sure, of course, if you chamber up your kick, it's meant to be bent before you extend. But this was like you chamber bent, you kick bent, you keep it bent. Your supporting leg is bent. You come up on the ball of your foot. Your punches, they don't teach you how to do a proper punch. It's all like slow, bent arms for everything. When you do like jabs and crosses, keep it bent. Now, of course, yeah, when you do any technique, it does have a slight bend in it, which actually stops it from locking out and breaking upon impact. However, that's only meant to be like a very slight bend. Choi Kwang Do, it's kind of got like these wonky bends like this. So, and if you're not extending your punches, you can hit somebody with a bent arm punch. But if you're not going to extend through, you're not going to have any force. It's just going to bend, hit, and then probably crumple on itself.
Let's go to hell tonight.
And that's certainly what I felt when I was doing, when I had those Choi lessons. I felt no power in any of the techniques. As a matter of fact, doing those kicks, coming up on the ball of a foot and having bent leg all the time, I felt myself losing balance. And I've generally got good balance. You know, at my tender age, I can still put on my socks and shoes on one leg and tie up my lace with one leg without wobbling at all. Go me. But Choi, the actual physiological biomechanics of Choi Kwang Do, I did not feel were beneficial at all. Lack of power, lack of balance. It felt awkward. It looked awkward. Yeah, looks aren't everything, I know, in martial arts, but it didn't look aesthetically pleasing. You could see somebody say do like a head height taekwondo kick, and it looks beautiful. You could see people doing like Muay Thai kicks, and you're thinking like, wow, that looks as though it's got substance behind it. With Choi, it looked awkward. It looked uncomfortable. A lot of the class format was literally just reciting an oath, a student class creed for some reason, doing patterns, which literally consists of you just standing on the spot, not moving, and you're just doing these what seem to be like random punches, random kicks. Then you might turn to the side and do random punches, random kicks. It had no logical follow on from any of these techniques. It wasn't like in karate we get bunkai, which is taking parts of kata, breaking them down so you can actually see what these kata moves are meant to do on an opponent. Choi Kwang Do, no such thing. It was very illogical. It was like a front leg side kick. Everything had to be front leg side kick, followed by a lead jab, followed by like a lead leg front kick, followed by like a sloppy hook with a sloppy lead hook with a lead leg jumping front kick. None of it made sense, and I could just almost imagine Grandmaster Choi sitting there just kind of like writing things down randomly whilst he was drunk. Oh, pattern number 78, what can it be? Lead leg front kick, lead glug 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 glug, lead sloppy jab, glug glug, and he just scrawls his pen across the paper. But with all that being said, Choi Kwang Do is expensive. And I remember that, especially the school that I went to train in. Luckily, I got my first lesson free. I think the second lesson I had to pay for it, something like that. If I remember correctly, it was upwards of 10 quid, £10, which is approximately about like $8.90 or something along that kind of line, maybe. Exchange rates always going up and down, but it was expensive. It was expensive. I could see if I was going to stay at that place for long term. Again, they wanted me to sign a contract, which to me is always a big red flag of a cult or a mcdojo. When I used to teach professionally, I always just insisted on pay as you go. But all these things about Choi Kwang Do just made it a cult. The cult mindset, you're not allowed to question. Grandmaster Choi is the best martial arts guy ever. It's the most effective martial art in the world. Having giant classes ranging from ages like 5 and upwards, children black belts, which I know you get a lot of kid black belts in other martial arts as well, but Choi Kwang Do, you seem to see a lot more children with black belts in Choi Kwang Do than what I have seen in other martial arts. That's from my personal opinion. There is actually a good video on YouTube. I might leave a link to it in the description. It's about this 6-year-old kid who's like a black belt in Georgia, in America or something. But yeah, I'll leave a link. I'll let you guys check that out and see what you think about that. But sloppy techniques, extortionate prices, all this kind of stuff, contracts, saying an oath before the lesson, all of it just smacks of cultism. So Choi Kwang Do is the only martial art that I will openly slag, basically. Um, and for me to be able to do that, I'm not a verbally aggressive person in that way, shape, or form. If I don't like something, I will generally just ignore it. But Choi Kwang Do is something that does get under my skin, and for good reason. And I believe my angst against Choi Kwang Do is very much justified. And I believe I'm not the only person who has an axe to grind against Choi Kwang Do. I don't believe Choi Kwang Do should exist. I think Choi Kwang Do should be ashamed of itself for calling itself a martial art, and especially for saying it's the most effective martial art. Actually, for saying it's proven to be the most effective martial art. And I think I've said enough about Choi. It's a cult. It's not a martial art. End of story. Anyway, guys, as always, if you have exposure to Choi Kwang Do, if you practice Choi Kwang Do, if you have been with Choi Kwang Do, if you've been brainwashed by the cult of Choi Kwang Do, if you've escaped from the brainwash cult of Choi Kwang Do, please, I would actually love to hear from you. I really will. Please leave comments in that section down below for you. I'll read all comments. I endeavour to respond to all comments. So go ahead. Let me know your experiences. Let me know your thoughts, because I'm sure we've probably shared some similar experiences.
Tonight, let's close our eyes and fall asleep. Tonight, I know a place where we could hide. Nobody will know about our secret little show.
Guys, in the meantime, stay safe, train hard, keep listening to White Zombie because they're the best band around, and I'll see you all in the next video. Booyah!